The moment I saw those bulldozers tearing into my sister's small blue house on Maple Street, I knew Karen Matthews had finally done what she'd been threatening for months. I'm Sheriff Robert Mitchell of Riverdale County, and that single mother they were making homeless? She's my little sister Jennifer. Jennifer wasn't always alone. 3 years ago, her husband Mark walked out, promising child support that never came. Left with 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Lucas, she worked double shifts at Riverdale Elementary as a teacher's aide while studying nights to get her teaching degree. That little house wasn't much, but it was everything to them. Karen Matthews, the HOA president with her perfect blonde hair and designer clothes, had been gunning for Jennifer since day one. Property values, she'd say, writing up violations for grass an inch too tall or a mailbox slightly crooked. But we all knew the truth. Karen couldn't stand seeing a single mother fighting to survive in her perfect neighborhood. Before we start the story, please comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel for more HOA stories. I was across county handling a highway accident when my deputy radioed, "Boss, you better get to Maple Street now." I'll never forget the sound of my sister's voice when I called her, or how my blood ran cold when she said, "They're destroying everything, Bobby." Everything. My cruiser hit 90 on the highway, lights flashing as I weaved through traffic. Every second felt like an hour. Jennifer had called me crying before. When Mark left, when the furnace broke during the coldest winter in decades, when Lucas needed stitches and her insurance wouldn't cover it. But this was different. This was raw terror. I'd warned her about Karen. That woman had been elected HOA president 3 years ago and turned our peaceful Oak Ridge community into her personal kingdom. Her husband Dan owned Matthews Construction, and suddenly every HOA project went to his company without competitive bidding. Funny how that worked. When I turned onto Maple Street, my heart nearly stopped. A yellow bulldozer was already through the front wall of Jennifer's house, the little porch swing I'd built for Emma's birthday dangling crookedly from a broken beam. A crowd of neighbors stood watching, some filming with their phones, others arguing with a woman in a crisp white pantsuit, Karen. I barely put my cruiser in park before jumping out, badge gleaming in the morning sun. "Stop that machine right now," I shouted, but the bulldozer operator couldn't hear me over the engine. Or pretended not to. Karen spotted me and her fake smile appeared instantly. "Sheriff Mitchell. What a surprise. We're just carrying out an HOA emergency action. All perfectly legal." "Legal? You're demolishing my sister's home." "Your sister?" Her smile faltered briefly. "Well, rules are rules regardless of family connections. Jennifer's property has racked up 17 violations in the past month alone. The board voted unanimously last night." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "My sister works 2 jobs and takes care of 2 kids alone. She pays her dues on time every month." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Actually, she's 3 months behind. We sent notices." That was a lie. I'd personally seen Jennifer write those checks. I was about to say so when a car screeched to a halt behind me. Jennifer tumbled out, still in her classroom aide uniform, face pale with shock. "My house," she whispered, watching as the bulldozer tore through her bedroom wall. "All our things." Karen checked her designer watch impatiently. "The HOA gave proper notice. Perhaps if you'd attended last night's emergency meeting." "What emergency meeting?" Jennifer's voice cracked. "I never got any notice." "We sent it certified mail," Karen replied smoothly, pulling a folder from her designer purse. "See? Signed for 3 days ago." I glanced at the receipt. The signature wasn't Jennifer's. It wasn't even close. "This isn't her signature," I said, feeling the familiar calm that comes before making an arrest. "Who signed for this, Karen?" Before she could answer, a school bus turned onto the street. My heart sank as I watched it stop at the corner. Emma and Lucas stepped off, backpacks bouncing, then froze when they saw the scene in front of them. "Mom?" Emma started running. "Mom? What's happening to our house?" Jennifer caught her daughter in a tight embrace as Lucas ran to join them, his Spider-Man backpack dropping forgotten on the sidewalk. "Where will my dinosaurs go?" Lucas asked, tears welling in his eyes. "And Daddy's picture?" I felt something snap inside me as I watched my niece and nephew realize they were becoming homeless before their eyes. In 15 years wearing this badge, I'd arrested drug dealers, stopped domestic violence, and talked down armed men. But nothing had ever filled me with the cold fury I felt watching my sister hold her crying children on the sidewalk while their world was destroyed. "Stop that bulldozer now," I told Karen, my voice deadly quiet. "Or I'll arrest every person on this demolition crew for destruction of property." Karen laughed. "You can't. The HOA. The HOA isn't above the law," I cut her off. And I'm looking at falsified documents, failure to provide proper notice, and potential fraud. So I suggest you stop that machine while I decide which charges to start with. Something in my expression must have convinced her, because Karen raised her hand and signaled to the bulldozer operator. The machine went silent, but the damage was already done. The entire front of Jennifer's house was rubble. As Karen stomped off to make phone calls, I walked over to my sister and pulled her and the kids into a hug. "You'll stay with me," I said firmly. "And tomorrow we're going to find out exactly what Karen's been up to." Jennifer looked up at me, her eyes red but suddenly steel hard. "She's been after my house for months, Bobby. She keeps saying it's bringing down property values. But why target me specifically?" A neighbor, Mrs. Chin, approached cautiously. "Sheriff Mitchell? I have something you might want to see." She held out her phone, showing a photo of blueprints spread across a table. I zoomed in and felt my suspicion transform into certainty. "Is that?" Jennifer asked. I nodded grimly. "Plans for Oak Ridge Community Center. Dated 2 months ago. And look where it's located. Right on top of Jennifer's property." "But they never announced plans for a community center," Mrs. Chin said. "I'm on the HOA email list." "Nothing. Because it wasn't going to be put to a vote," I replied. "Karen and her husband had this planned all along." I looked back at the ruins of my sister's home, at Emma clutching her mother's hand and Lucas staring at his destroyed bedroom. This wasn't just about enforcing HOA rules or property values. This was Karen and her husband clearing the way for another lucrative construction contract. "Jennifer," I said, taking my sister's hand, "I know you're in shock right now. But I need you to remember, did you really miss HOA payments?" She shook her head firmly. "No. I have the canceled checks to prove it. I keep copies of everything since Karen started targeting me last year." Mrs. Chin cleared her throat. "Sheriff? Karen's been doing this to others too. The Wilsons moved out after she fined them thousands for their son's wheelchair ramp. Said it wasn't aesthetically compliant." Other neighbors were gathering now, whispering, some shooting angry glances toward Karen, who was furiously speaking into her phone. "Bobby," Jennifer said quietly, "she picked me because I'm an easy target. A single mom with no husband to back me up. She thought I couldn't fight back." I looked at my sister, exhausted from working double shifts, still in her school aide uniform, holding her children close, and saw the strength that Karen had underestimated. "She was wrong," I said. "She didn't count on you having a brother who's the county sheriff. And she certainly didn't count on the evidence trail she's been leaving." That night, after getting the kids settled in my spare bedroom, Jennifer collapsed on my couch, the adrenaline finally wearing off. I handed her a cup of hot tea and sat beside her. "I keep thinking about Emma's butterfly collection," she said softly. "And Lucas's drawings on the refrigerator. All those little things that can't be replaced." "I know," I said, wishing I could offer more comfort. "You know what hurts the most?" Jennifer's voice cracked. "Last week at the grocery store, Karen walked right past me like I was invisible. But I heard what she said to her friend. That's the Jenkins woman. No husband, barely making ends meet. People like that bring down the whole neighborhood." My hands tightened around my mug. "She said that?" Jennifer nodded. "She's never seen me as a person, Bobby. Just a single mother who doesn't fit her image of what Oak Ridge should be. A stain she needed to remove." "Well, she picked the wrong stain to mess with," I said, earning a small smile from my sister. "I worked so hard for that house," Jennifer whispered. "After Mark left, everyone said I should sell it, that it was too much for me to handle alone. But I wanted the kids to have stability. One thing in their lives that wouldn't change." I remembered how Jennifer had scraped together the down payment, selling her wedding ring, working night shifts at the 24-hour diner in addition to her school job, cutting every possible corner. Mark had promised to help but disappeared with his young secretary instead, leaving Jennifer with mortgage payments designed for 2 incomes. "The first night in that house," Jennifer continued, staring into her tea, "Lucas was afraid of his new room. He'd only ever known our old apartment. I slept on his floor and Emma joined us too. We all ended up in sleeping bags, having an indoor camping adventure." Her voice broke. "Where will we have adventures now?" I put my arm around her shoulders, feeling her exhaustion. "We'll figure this out, Jen. I promise." Early the next morning, I was on the phone with the county prosecutor while Jennifer got the kids ready for school. She'd insisted they go, wanting to maintain normalcy despite everything. "The bank records confirm it," I told the prosecutor. Jennifer's checks to the HOA were all cashed, including the 3 months Karen claimed were unpaid. But they weren't deposited into the HOA's regular account. They went to something called Oak Ridge Development Fund. That's not in the HOA charter, the prosecutor replied. I just checked. And I've confirmed with 3 board members that no emergency meeting was ever held to approve the demolition. The signatures on the documents Karen showed me were forged. Jesus, the prosecutor muttered. How did she think she'd get away with this? Because she always has before, I said. She's been systematically targeting vulnerable homeowners, single parents, elderly residents, immigrants. People she thought wouldn't or couldn't fight back. After dropping the kids at school, Jennifer joined me at the county records office. The clerk, a former high school classmate, had pulled all the documents related to Oak Ridge Community. Look at this, she said, spreading out property records. 3 months ago, a company called Oak Ridge Community Development LLC started buying properties surrounding your block, Jennifer. Who owns this LLC? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The clerk flipped to the incorporation papers. Karen and Daniel Matthews. Jennifer leaned closer. But why my house specifically? There are dozens of houses in Oak Ridge. Location, the clerk said, showing us a zoning map. Your house sits at the corner where residential meets commercial zoning. For their development plans to work, they'd need that specific lot. Jennifer's face paled as understanding dawned. They couldn't buy me out because I refused to sell last year. Remember that real estate investor who kept calling me? He offered way below market value. I nodded, remembering how proud Jennifer had been to turn down what seemed like easy money. And when you wouldn't sell? They manufactured violations until they could claim emergency demolition powers, Jennifer finished. My phone rang, Deputy Garcia calling from the site of Jennifer's demolished home. Boss, the county inspector is here. There's no demolition permit on file for this address. None. The entire demolition was unauthorized. I thanked him and hung up, turning to Jennifer. We've got them. Fraud, falsifying documents, unauthorized demolition, misappropriation of HOA funds, conflict of interest. But will it be enough? Jennifer asked. They have money, connections. Which is exactly why they never saw us coming, I replied. Karen thought you were an easy target. She never considered you might have evidence of every payment, copies of every violation notice, and a brother who's the county sheriff. That afternoon, we returned to what remained of Jennifer's house. County inspectors were documenting everything, and Deputy Garcia had stopped Karen's crew from removing the debris. It was evidence now. Jennifer walked slowly through the ruins, the afternoon sun highlighting the devastation. This had been her sanctuary, the place where she had rebuilt her life after Mark abandoned them, where she'd helped Emma with homework at the kitchen table, where she'd nursed Lucas through chicken pox, where she'd stayed up late studying for her own classes after the kids were asleep. Lucas suddenly pointed at something colorful amid the rubble. Mom, my dinosaur blanket. Sure enough, a corner of his beloved T-Rex blanket was visible beneath some drywall. With the inspector's permission, we carefully moved debris until we recovered it, dirty but intact. That blanket became the first of many small treasures unearthed that afternoon. Emma's favorite books had survived under her fallen bookshelf. A family photo album was recovered from a partially standing closet. But the true game-changer came when we found Jennifer's fireproof documents safe buried under what had been her home office desk. Inside were birth certificates, insurance papers, and most importantly, a flash drive labeled HOA records. I kept digital copies of everything, Jennifer explained, her hands trembling as she held the drive. Every payment, every communication, every violation notice with dates and photos. After the first year of harassment, I got paranoid. Thank God you did, I said, imagining Karen's face when she realized Jennifer had documentation of everything. As we continued salvaging what we could, neighbors began to arrive. Mrs. Chin brought garbage bags and boxes. The Ramirez family came with gloves and water bottles. Old Mr. Peterson arrived with his grandson and a pickup truck to transport whatever we recovered. I pulled Jennifer aside as more neighbors gathered. Did you know all these people cared this much? She shook her head, watching as strangers carefully sorted through the debris of her life, exclaiming with delight whenever they found something intact. I always felt so alone, Bobby. Ever since Mark left, I've been so focused on just surviving day to day, working multiple jobs, studying, taking care of the kids. I barely had time to talk to neighbors. Well, they've been watching, I said. They've seen your struggle. And they're not going to let Karen get away with this. By sunset, we had recovered perhaps 10% of Jennifer's belongings, a heartbreaking fraction of a family's life together. But watching my sister stand amid the ruins, surrounded by neighbors offering help and support, I realized something important. Karen had demolished a house, but she had unintentionally revealed the true foundation beneath it. A foundation of community, resilience, and love that no bulldozer could destroy. That night, as Jennifer tucked the kids into bed in my spare room, I heard Lucas ask the question that had clearly been weighing on him all day. "Mom, is it because Daddy left that they took our house?" My heart broke as I paused in the hallway, hearing the confusion in my nephew's voice. Children see connections adults don't, and in his 6-year-old mind, the loss of his father and the loss of his home were somehow linked. "No, sweetie," Jennifer replied, her voice steady despite everything. "Sometimes people just do mean things because they can. But remember what I always tell you, what matters isn't what happens to us, but how we respond to it." "Are we going to get our house back?" Emma asked. "Not the old one," Jennifer said honestly. "But we're going to have a home again. I promise you both." As Jennifer emerged from the bedroom, I saw the toll the day had taken. She looked 10 years older, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "He thinks it's because we don't have a dad," she whispered, tears finally breaking through her composure. "Like we're somehow less deserving of a home because we're not a complete family." I pulled her into a hug. "Karen's actions reflect on her character, not your worth," I said firmly. "And tomorrow we start making this right." The next day brought a flurry of activity. Jennifer took the kids to school, then met me at the county prosecutor's office. We presented our evidence. Bank records showing Jennifer's payments had been cashed but diverted to the Matthews private account, falsified HOA meeting minutes, forged signatures, the documented pattern of harassment, and the blueprints proving the demolition was part of a premeditated development plan. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Helen Martinez, reviewed everything carefully. "This is actually criminal," she said, looking up from the documents. "Not just civil violations or HOA overreach. Wire fraud, destruction of property, falsifying documents, corruption. And don't forget the emotional distress caused to 2 minor children," I added. Helen nodded, her expression hardening. "I have children myself. What you're describing, targeting a single mother specifically because she seemed vulnerable and less likely to fight back, that's predatory." She picked up her phone. "I'll have arrest warrants ready within the hour." While Jennifer met with a victim's advocate to discuss temporary housing options, I returned to the station to coordinate with Deputy Garcia. We planned to serve the warrants that evening at the scheduled HOA meeting. "Garcia, I want this by the book," I said. "No grandstanding, no unnecessary drama. These people have connections." "Understood, boss," he replied. "But off the record? I hope they resist arrest." "Just a little." I smiled despite myself. Garcia had a 6-year-old daughter himself and had been quietly furious since hearing what happened to Lucas and Emma. The Oak Ridge Community Clubhouse was packed when we arrived that evening. Word had spread about what happened to Jennifer's house, and neighbors wanted answers. Karen stood at the front with her typical composure, her husband Dan beside her. "Before we begin tonight's regular agenda," Karen announced, "I'd like to address the unfortunate situation at 247 Maple Street. The board acted in accordance with HOA bylaws after repeated violations and non-payment of dues." "That's a lie," Jennifer said clearly, standing up. The room went silent. Karen's smile tightened. "Miss Jenkins, you're not on the agenda." "I have proof that every allegation you made against me was fabricated," Jennifer continued, her voice steady. "I have bank records showing my dues were paid and cashed. I have documentation that no emergency meeting was ever held. And I have evidence that you and your husband planned to build luxury condos where my house stood." Murmurs spread through the room. Karen's face flushed. "These are serious accusations." "They're more than accusations," I said, standing beside my sister. "They're charges." I nodded to Deputy Garcia, who entered with 2 county officers. "Karen Matthews, Daniel Matthews, you're under arrest for fraud, falsification of documents, unauthorized demolition, misappropriation of funds, and conspiracy." Karen's perfect composure shattered. "This is absurd. We have every right." "To destroy a single mother's home while she's at work and her children are at school?" Jennifer asked. "To forge signatures? To embezzle HOA funds into your private development company?" Karen turned to the other board members for support, but they were backing away, shock on their faces. Clearly they hadn't known the full extent of what she'd done. "You can't prove any of this," Dan said, but his voice lacked conviction. I held up a flash drive. Every payment Jennifer made, documented with bank records. Every violation notice, with photos disproving the claims. The falsified emergency meeting minutes. The blueprint plans dated months before you claimed structural issues. The separate bank account where you diverted HOA funds. As Deputy Garcia read them their rights, Karen turned to Jennifer with venom in her eyes. You think this will stop anything? Do you know who we are in this county? Jennifer met her gaze steadily. Yes. You're the people who made my children homeless. And now everyone else knows too. As the Matthews were led away, the clubhouse erupted in conversation. The remaining board members looked shell-shocked. Mrs. Chin stood up and called for order. I think we need an emergency meeting, a real one, to address what's happened and how we move forward, she said. And our first agenda item should be how to help the Jenkins family. The following days brought more revelations. The county investigation uncovered a pattern of financial misconduct stretching back to when Karen first became HOA president. Matthews Construction had been awarded contracts at inflated prices, with kickbacks hidden in obscure accounting entries. Other homeowners came forward with stories of harassment and selective enforcement. Karen and Dan posted bail but were facing multiple felony charges. Their development plans collapsed when investors pulled out after the negative publicity. But the true miracle was how the community responded. Mrs. Chun called another meeting, this time at the local elementary school cafeteria to accommodate the larger crowd. The Oak Ridge community has funds in reserve for improvement projects, she announced. Our first proposal is to use a portion to help rebuild Jennifer Jenkins's home. The vote was unanimous. What happened next stunned even me. Local contractors, many of whom had lost bids to Matthews Construction over the years, volunteered their services. Building supply companies offered materials at cost. Jennifer's colleagues at the school organized a fundraiser for household items. The children's classmates collected toys and books to replace what was lost. Why? Jennifer asked me one evening as we reviewed the rebuilding plans spread across my kitchen table. Why do all these people care so much? Because what happened to you could have happened to any of them, I said. Karen preyed on you because you were alone, a single mother with no partner to back you up. But she didn't understand that being a single mother didn't make you weak. It made you stronger than she could imagine. Jennifer smiled sadly. Not strong enough to save our home. No, but strong enough to build a better one. And not just a house, a community. 6 weeks later, I stood beside Jennifer as she turned the key in the door of her new home. Built on the same foundation as the old one, but improved in countless ways, better insulation, a proper study for her teaching work, built-in bookshelves for Emma, and dinosaur murals painted on Lucas's walls by an art teacher from the elementary school. I never thought I'd be able to give them this, Jennifer whispered, watching as the kids ran excitedly from room to room, discovering all the personal touches the builders had included. The housewarming party that followed felt like a block celebration. Neighbors brought food, gifts, and most importantly, friendship. Jennifer, who had been so isolated in her struggle as a single mother, was now at the center of a supportive community. Karen Matthews had severely underestimated what she was up against. She thought Jennifer was vulnerable because she was raising children alone, working multiple jobs and struggling financially. She never realized that those very challenges had forged an unbreakable spirit. 3 months later, Jennifer graduated with her teaching degree. The entire neighborhood attended the ceremony, cheering as she received her diploma. She was hired full-time at Riverdale Elementary, teaching 3rd grade, including, ironically, Karen Matthews' nephew, who adored his new teacher. The legal proceedings against Karen and Dan continued, resulting in a plea deal, significant fines, community service, and a ban from holding HOA positions or obtaining county construction contracts for 10 years. But perhaps the most fitting punishment was watching from the sidelines as Jennifer thrived. As for the HOA, it was transformed under new leadership that included Jennifer and other previously marginalized homeowners. The Oak Ridge Homeowner Protection Guidelines, they established, were eventually adopted by other communities in the county as a model of fairness and transparency. One evening, almost a year after the demolition, I sat with Jennifer on her new front porch, watching Emma and Lucas play with neighborhood friends in the yard. Karen once told me people like me brought down property values, Jennifer said quietly. A single mother struggling to make ends meet didn't fit her vision of what this neighborhood should be. I looked around at the thriving community, at the children playing together regardless of their family situations or economic backgrounds, at the neighbors stopping to chat as they walked their dogs or returned from work. Turns out she was wrong about what gives a community value, I replied. Jennifer nodded, watching her children laugh with friends who had stood by them through their darkest days. It was never about the houses. It was about the people inside them. Emma had started a school project interviewing people about housing rights that won the district science fair. And Lucas still talked about becoming an architect who builds houses too strong for bulldozers. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. Karen wanted to build luxury condos and instead built something far more valuable. A community that discovered its voice, its power, and its heart. And every time I drive past my sister's house now with its brightly colored front door, definitely not HOA approved under the old regime, and the children playing in the yard, I'm reminded of what Karen Matthews never understood. Home isn't just about property values or perfect lawns. It's about people who stand together when one of them falls. And in Riverdale County, that's a foundation no bulldozer can ever destroy. The final twist in our story came 6 months later. Jennifer received a letter from Mark, her ex-husband. He'd seen a national news story about what happened and wanted to reconnect with the kids. Jennifer showed me the letter, her expression unreadable. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. "I'll let the kids decide if they want to see him. But as for me..." She looked around at the home and community she had built without him. "I've realized something important, Bobby. I was never really a single mother. I was just a mother who thought she was single. But I've had a family all along. It just looks different than I expected." As I watched my sister welcome neighborhood children into her yard for Emma's birthday party that weekend, I thought about how profoundly Karen's cruelty had backfired. In trying to remove what she saw as a blemish on her perfect community, she had instead revealed its true strength. Jennifer stood in her new kitchen, surrounded by friends, preparing to bring out Emma's birthday cake. 3 years ago she had been abandoned, frightened, and alone. Today she was the heart of a community that had discovered its own power. All because someone thought a single mother would be too weak to fight back. They couldn't have been more wrong.